from Pretoria. Is everything all right? People talk or say things.
Hello?
Why didn't you tell me it was out of order? I suppose you think that's funny.
I'm not allowed out the front door.
Who says you weren't?
Them.
Who?
Them.
It was terrible out there. I could hear breathing.
We told you.
Are you worried about the man?
They hate us. That's the truth. They want to kill and torture every one of us. You can see it in their eyes.
Come now, Frederick. Do you dream about unholy things?
I really don't know what's going on here. There's something wrong, and that's a fact.
Wait. What did you dream last night? This manifestation of evil. You must be delivered from evil.
Brown-haired albino was unbuttoning his coat, his eyes on Cermak, who was shaking hands with Roosevelt.
Well, it's wonderful to see you, Tony. A lovely gesture.
I just wanted to remind you and your administration that you have my full and enthusiastic support.
The albino assassin was reaching under his coat, but I grabbed his arm and pulled it away, and his hand came back empty, the gun still under his arm as his coat flapped. I buried a fist in his belly and doubled him over. And when he came up, the snout of my 9mm stared him in the face.
You got you this time, fucker!
Sounded like firecrackers, and the muzzle flash above the crowd looked like fireworks, but this was something else. Blurred figures in the crowd were falling, and a stubby, bushy-haired brown little man in a white shirt standing up on a bench was swarmed like a come-to-Jesus meeting got out of hand. Meanwhile, the ex-blonde was pulling away, and I swung at him, and he went down, unconscious, as the mass of people around us were heading to my right. I moved against the tide towards Cermak, pushing, shoving, and got to that touring car where Miller and Lang were crouched over the fallen Cermak, red spreading from his left side under his unbuttoned suit coat.
Where? Where were the goddamn bodyguards?
I had the blonde, Your Honor. He didn't fire the round. Some bushy-haired little creep.
This was no time to tell him he'd been shot by his son-in-law's gardener.
What the hell? They got me after all, Heller.
The crowd was turning into a mob. Miller, Lang, and I were hovering over Cermak in the quiet of the storm.
Heller, get your people out of the way. We need to move the president and his vehicle out of here. For Christ's sakes, Cermak's been shot. Take him with you. Get him to a hospital.
Roosevelt, sitting in back, heard me.
Put Tony in here and get us the hell out.
The shooter's big revolver was clicking on an empty chamber now. But that must have had an 8-round rod, as I found myself on a battlefield where bleeding audience members wandered like wounded warriors, helped by their dazed loved ones.
Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, and you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to play this.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Robservations with Robert Burnett.
One more time. Greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and, of course, the never-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, moi, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you from right here, right in the Robservatory, coming at you, you Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 1064. When I'm 64, which isn't far away, really, if you think about it. You know, still feeling good. I'm waiting for the bottom to fall out. You know, I started to feel like a decrepit wreck. We are on the eve of Shocktober, the month of horror, the month that, you know, in LA, Shocktober is a big deal. My neighbors had their Shocktober decorations up in mid-August. my local Albertsons. It's Joe Albertson's supermarket. But the Halloween candy department is all of ours, and it's everywhere. You walk in there, there's been Halloween candy all over my local grocery store since August. It's a good thing. You know, when I was a kid, we used to eagerly await Halloween, but it was kind of a one-day thing. Didn't have a kind of build-up. It's weird. Everything I loved when I was a kid, nothing has changed. It's the same thing. Halloween, Zoftic girls with big hips and boobs, the Starship Enterprise, and horror movies. Nothing has changed. I mean, it's kind of weird. It's kind of sad if you think about it. What was the evolution in my life? Maybe it's because I didn't have kids of my own. You know, maybe that was a problem, which was, you know, not something I was expecting. I thought I would have kids of my own. It would have been fun to indoctrinate them in the ways of all of this stuff. And who's going to take care of me? Who's going to want this when I'm dead? No one. All this stuff, no one's going to care. I mean, who's going to want my sealed Dawn of the Dead board game that Slave, a guy named Slave, yes, gave me? It's in mint condition. It's still sealed. You think I'm going to sell it? The answer to that question is no, I am not. I spend a lot of time thinking about horror. I think about the horror genre a lot. You know, horror, Chris Gore talks about the media diet. And I think a lot about cinema. Rob G, I don't know if you have listened to or dipped into the Icons of Fright podcast. I think it's quite good. Rob G and his compatriots are bringing to you a beautiful book of 100. Actually, they've already brought it to you. It's at Amazon right now. Now I can't speak. You can get the hardcover, you can get the soft cover, or you can get the Kindle version. I recommend the hardcover. It's a very nice tome. And it collects a lot of the interviews that they did over the years, including vintage interviews from 20 years ago and brand new interviews that were done special for the book. And the third Icons of Fright podcast will drop this week. And, you know, it's always depressing to me. I mean, and this is not me blaming you or saying, oh, woe is me. But, you know, the guys who did the Icons of Fright podcast, they put it together. It's really nice. It's really interesting. It's really well done. And I know I wanted this channel to be the Burnettwork. But obviously the other programming that isn't involving me it doesn't catch fire, which I understand because, you know, people seem to want to watch me ramble, but I highly recommend the Icons of Fright podcast. A lot of great stories, a lot of love about the genre, and there's some really great insights. These guys know their shit, and that's why I wanted to put the podcast on this channel. You can listen to it wherever podcasts are available, but you can only watch the video right here on the Burnettwork. And big shout out to Rob Galuzzo and all of his compatriots for not only putting the book together, but offering, I think, some great programming here on YouTube. So check that out. But now we move into Shocktober, and I love horror genre, but Rob and I are going to do a show called Cinema Palette. I'll be doing a show with Alvaro called The Forever Era, but Rob and I, even since before that, it predates this, we've been talking about doing a show called Cinema Palette. And imagine a wine connoisseur's show, but about movies, where we're going to talk about obscure directors, and we'll probably have an audience of like 5 people. But we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to talk about great cinema, and Cinema Palette is going to be a great show that we've been talking about. We just got to get on it. My problem is I don't have an artist to do the lower thirds like we have for Let's Get Physical Media, because my friend Christopher Zevius passed away. And I haven't asked Bartos to do it, but you need great graphics. I don't have that if anybody wants to chime in. But, that's where I'm at. But I keep thinking that horror, of all the genres of cinema, there are many different palettes when it comes to the kinds of horror people like. And a lot of people don't take horror very seriously. They like being scared. And you can have sort of defanged horror, Goosebumps, that kind of thing, R.L. Stine horror. You got to have... It's very funny because, to me, my YA fiction was Stephen King. It was Graham Masterton. It was James Herbert. You know, and it was... the more sexually explicit, violent, and horrific, the better. I mean, I've told this story before, but one of my Aunt Barbara, who would supply me with books before I could drive, she would always ask me what books did I want, and she would get me the books I wanted. And I told her that I wanted these James Herbert books because I had read The Rats at summer camp. And so I'd asked for, she went out and got me his book, The Fog, James Herbert's The Fog. It has nothing to do with John Carpenter's movie, but I loved chapter 5 of The Fog because it was all about the sexual affair that these people were having. It was, I'm like 11. And then, of course, there was The Survivor and The Dark. I think that was what she got me. And then, of course, Graham Masterton's books. I discovered Graham Masterton because when The Manitou came out, I had to go read his books. I had to read The Manitou because I love the movie The Manitou. I mean, it's not a great movie, but I loved it because I saw it in the theater. And so there's a book. It's based on a book. Got to go get the book, read the book. Wasn't a novelization. Then, of course, Revenge of the Manitou came out, and Burial came out, and Manitou Blood came out. Why can't I remake the Manitou? Somebody get me the rights. I would love to remake the Manitou and talk about an IP. I want to bring make the Manitou great again. Misquamacus must come back. Who's going to play John Singing Rock? Michael Anzara played him. Tony Curtis was in the movie. Susan Strasberg. Who doesn't want to remake the Manitou? Well, probably a lot of people because it hasn't been remade yet. But horror, I read as much horror as I watched, and I loved the horror genre. But it was very interesting because there's classical, what I would consider classical horror, Universal Monsters, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, all of that. To me, classical horror took place like in Europe, because as I've always liked to tell people, everybody in Europe, the people in Europe have been human beings longer than we have, and the people in Africa and Egypt, places in Africa, they've been human beings longer than the people in Europe. And the longer you've been around, the better your horror is. But then again, it's also the most classical horror. And so growing up, that's what I got. I got lots of classical horror. And of course, what really changed the horror genre was the Vietnam era horror. And I think that you can argue with me all you want, but obviously Peeping Tom and Psycho was a big turning point in horror. Not just because it ruined Michael Powell's directing career, but the fact that what Hitchcock did with Psycho, based on a book by Robert Bloch, of course, the visceral nature of it, and what happened to horror, and I think the most important thing that ever happened to the genre, is horror used to be about the external, which is all metaphoric. You know, monsters, Frankenstein. The monster wasn't the problem. It was Dr. Frankenstein who was the problem. You know, but still. But what happened eventually is the true monsters came out. And the true monsters came to the fore. And those were always us. We were the monsters. But when you got to Psycho, which of course, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, had its roots back in the true story of Ed Gein. And we've always been the worst. Humanity has always been weird. There's no better monsters than humans. And through whether you have Vlad the Impaler or whether you have Nazis, nobody is better. Or of course, Baron Orgaz, 1974. But I'll tell you, horror as a genre has always fascinated me because my greatest fear as a small child growing up was the loss of civility, the loss of civilization when the evil comes out of man. Maybe it was because I'm Jewish and I was raised a Jew. I had a Jewish education, and every year I met people that were interned in concentration camps and heard their stories. And the idea that when you're a little kid, the thing that you can't, I think that was really, it was hardest for me to wrap my head around growing up, was that one day your friends and neighbors, people that lived in Germany for a long time, one group of people decided that this other group of people was no longer human, that they were lesser. Now, then it's interesting because some people got this the other way around. Then in like the 4th grade, when I was 10 years old, what added to that horror was when Roots was a thing and the TV miniseries was out. You know, I was 10 years old. It was the 4th grade. And Alex Haley's book Roots was a big deal. And learning that Americans, we used to think that there was a group of people that were lesser, that were animals. And I always found that I couldn't quite come to grips with that as a kid. And I think that was the thing that, to this day, it scares me the most, the loss of civility. We see it all the time. And I never thought I would live in a world where still, as a young boy going to Sunday school, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, now that I'm, in the 5th decade of my life, there's more people on earth that think Jews are subhuman than maybe ever before. And no one's bashful about talking about it either. And it truly is an interesting state of affairs. But again, it just goes to show you that the horror genre is steeped in the evils that men do. We'll live after you. Don't cry, Caesar. But it's an interesting thing. And again, maybe horror is what made me interested in people as much as Star Trek and science fiction did. Because on one hand, they're both dealing with science fiction and horror are genres that are dealing with the human condition in ways that no other genres do. In terms of science fiction, it's a genre of possibility. Sure, you've got your dystopian worlds and all of that, but for me, when I first got into science fiction, it was looking to the future. It was looking what humanity could become. And it was inherently sort of optimistic because it said we had a future and we were going places. Whereas horror really can be broken down into two. To me, there are two tracks of horror. There's the idea of the fear of dying and what's going to happen to you after you die. You're going to die, and the pain of death, the horror of death. And then the flip side of that is the horror of continuing to live. So on one hand, horror will take you to death, and you can fear death and all of that because it's the great unknown. Or you don't die, and you have to stay alive in whatever horror you're stuck in. Whether it's Nazi Germany, whether the demons have conquered the earth, whether vampires have taken over, whether you've been made part of the undead and you have to live forever as one of the undead. You can never see the sun in the sky. You have to drink blood the rest of your life. So you're either going to die, that's one hand, or you're going to go and on living in whatever situation you're in. So that to me was horror, whereas science fiction inherently to me was about human life being better or at least more interesting. So that's kind of where I was at. But I loved horror because the thing about horror was it was much more of the, well, as they said on Star Trek in Return of the Archons, it was much more of the body. And one of the things that horror taught me when I was young, to this day I still think about it, is that to be born is to die. So let's take the science fiction elements out of there. That's inherently horrific. And our life is one of, accelerated decrepitude, as Pris said in Blade Runner. That's where we're going. We're going into the dark tunnel of non-existence in a slow, inexorable march to the end of our life. And if we live to a ripe old age, that means none of our body doesn't work anymore. We can't see, we can't hear, we can't fuck. Nothing is good. But we continue to go on until the light finally goes out. So the existence of humanity lends itself more to, I think, horror than it does to science fiction. So it behooved me to be fans of both. So, and now that I've reached a point in my own life where the science fiction aspects are kind of receding in the rear view and the horror elements are looming large, so to speak, I still love both genres, but they're kind of trading off. And although who are we kidding? I've loved horror since I was a kid. But the thing was, I always felt that there was something, when you hear Roy Batty say, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. That's profound. I get it. But to me, the more horror can have more profundity in it than science fiction can. It's harder to make people believe in that profundity because horror has so many more overt, fantastical elements. The supernatural, undead coming back to life, patchwork men being built by mad scientists that are revived by lightning. I mean, there's all this whimsical, crazy stuff, and a lot of it is icky because it's of the body. You know, one of my favorite things in all of horror fiction, and I love horror fiction, was when Clive Barker's Books of Blood came out, and I got those first edition 6 hardcovers of the Books of Blood, and there at the front of each book it said, "Everyone is a book of blood. Whenever we're open, we're red." Which I always love that. Like, I don't want to be open, you know, but Clive Barker was right there. And the thing is, horror novels still, to this day, from the time I was a kid, reading, whether it was The Fog or The Dark or Survivor, reading some hardcore British Graham Masterton horror. It was great because Graham Masterton would bring back like ancient demons and couple it with explicit sex that the main characters were having. So they were fighting against and he delved into other cultures. Like, I remember reading Tengu, Graham Masterton's Tengu. There was a Japanese demon that came back to kick some ass and get some revenge on America because of World War II, and detonated the Santa Fe nuclear power plant, which is always on the way to San Diego Comic-Con. I'm like, that's awesome. And of course, the Jinn, Misquamacus, the Manitou, was a medicine man, even though he was a Grandmaster. Graham Masterton was a Brit. He wrote horror novels, and he wrote actual sex manuals for couples. He was like a married dude. So, best of both worlds. I never read any of his sex manuals, though. But, you know, I loved this kind of horror. And I have to tell you, there was a book I read a couple of years back. I thought that I could not read something. Like, I thought I'd seen it all. I'd read it all. I thought that... And one of the things I love with horror is the hybridization of horror. I like when you get sort of fantasy worlds of sci-fi mixed with horror. And the Spirit Brothers made 2 movies that I adore. Daybreakers, that, of course, Lionsgate Limited just put out on Blu-ray, and on 4K, and Umbrella released their big box set. But they also, and that was a straight up Carpenter-esque, the world's been taken over by vampires, everybody's a vampire, there's a few humans left, and they live in this kind of sci-fi future world. How do they deal with that? One of my favorite books about vampires, and again, I have memories of these, so they might not be as good as I remember. I just remember when I read them, I liked them. There's a book that was written by Yvonne Navarro called After Age. And it was about vampires in Chicago. And the world had been taken over by vampires, but they couldn't kill all the humans because they needed the blood. So it was a constant struggle, and there was a human character that was procured human. He was like a human trader that would procure, he was a capo, would procure humans for the vampires, and the vampires would let him, he was a terrible, horrible person that he was always looking for women to have his way with them. But After Age, I remember reading Yvonne Navarro's After Age, thinking that was a great fucking book. And then she wrote a sequel to that, which I just don't remember anything about. I have it around here somewhere, but I read it, but I don't remember it. But it had that kind of hybridization, the fall of the world, kind of like the Dawn of the Dead. Zombies are here, but it was vampires, and it was in Chicago, and I loved it. But like the Spirit Brothers making Daybreakers, kind of a science fiction horror hybrid, and then they also made Predestination, which is a time travel science fiction story that had a lot of horror elements in it. That was the adaptation of Robert Heinlein's All You Zombies. But I read a book recently, because I'm always on the lookout for good horror novels, and there's just not that many that interest me. I've told you before, I have to get intellectually interested in something. There's got to be a hook. Well, I read about this book, and I'm like, oh, I got to read that. And the book is called Tender is the Flesh. Cadaver, if you speak Spanish, Cadaver Exquisito, Exquisite Cadaver. And it's originally written in Spanish by an Argentinian writer, Cadaver Exquisito, and it's by Argentine author Agustina Bazterrica. I'm sure Alvaro can forgive my pronunciation. If he knows this book, I don't know if he knows this book. So, in this book, Tenders the Flesh, the world's turned into a mess after what they call, this thing happened they called the transition. And I've got some notes right here. The transition was a virus that infected animals, and it was found to be deadly to humans. So all the animals in the world were slaughtered and burned en masse. And so the world's population was only either, they had two choices. They could just become all vegan, or they would eat each other. Human society had to become, I mean, I don't know, pescatarian, you could do that. But so certain human beings now were being bred to be, these humans were called head. They were being bred to be eaten. So instead of like the clones in a wonderful movie called Never Let Me Go, based on a great book that Mark Romanek, if you haven't seen that movie, well, I just ruined the end for you. But Never Let Me Go is one of my favorite science fiction novels and favorite movies of the modern age. It's a book about cloning, and the movie's about cloning, and the main characters that we meet, that we fall in love with in the movie, were specifically in that future, they figured out how to clone human beings in the 50s. And so people were being cloned, and they were being specifically cloned for their originals to use their body parts, use the clones' body parts as they get older. So they clone themselves, and they're younger, and they're able, and there's a giver. They're called givers, and the givers will give up their body parts to their originals as their originals get older. And what a monstrous idea. And the idea is that the clones, human society would rather just admit or think that they don't have souls. So in this book, Tenders the Flesh, human beings are being bred to be eaten. And so how do you deal with that? And it deals with the same idea of, do replicants have souls? Kind of what Alien Earth was talking about. So could we breed human beings to eat and not let human beings get educated? And let's just say it goes from there. And the book was just, it deals with, obviously, as all good genre fiction does, it has a lot to say about our world today, allegorically using certain ideas about capitalism and how we treat one another, and familial bonds, and it's just, and the fact that it was written by an Argentinian, I would love to make that movie. I don't know if anybody would want to see that movie, but I would love to see that movie. I mean, David Cronenberg would have been a great director. Maybe a little on the nose, but he would have been a great director for this movie. But again, it was the concept of this story. You know, how does human civilization deal with this? And, you know, as you see in movies about the degradation, whether you're talking about the killing fields, which with the story of Hang Nor escaping from Cambodia, one of the things that we saw in the 20th century is how easy it is for human beings to dehumanize other human beings because of their belief systems. And that's one of the things that I get worried about when that's why radical Islam to me is something that I'm fearful of. I'm not Islamophobic, because phobic says irrational fear. But when you're dealing with a civilization that can dehumanize people because their prophet has told them they can, and you know, to die as a martyr is better to live. Music is haram. Women can't become educated. You want beautiful women. Have you seen Persian women? Do you want them under burqas? No. But these are things, and we saw the entire 20th century, Pol Pot, Hitler. I mean, you name it. The dehumanization of one group by another group. What's going on with the Yazidis, or what's going on with the Christians in Africa now? How one group, the Rwandan genocide, people that look exactly the same as one another are wiping each other out. We're very good at this. And this is my ultimate fear, is that I'm going to be on the receiving end of somebody who has completely dehumanized me. And that's why I like movies, and movies like The Strangers, maybe not the new ones, but like the original Strangers, or, movies about home invasions, funny games, both versions of funny games, where civility is lost. You think you live in a civilization, and suddenly you realize people show up in your house and they'll rape your wife in front of you and kill you and burn your house down and kill your children. Why? Because human beings are the most evil creatures in existence. And since we don't know of any other creatures in the entire infinitude of the universe, animals don't prey on each other the way human beings do. And of course, this is a common theme in both horror and science fiction, and it's the theme that I find most unsettling. The loss of civility. Building a civilization is really, really difficult, but tearing it down can happen in a day. And that's the thing that terrifies me the most. And I have to say, I love facing my fear, because you give me those stories and I eat them up. That and virus stories. I love viruses. And because, again, viruses decimate civilizations very quickly. I mean, to me, watching Steven Soderbergh's Contagion is like, I'll eat a pizza dinner watching that movie. Give me disease films. And when you see something like the Anton strain, which is a combination of disease and science fiction, I'm like, come on. I love that stuff. And I can't tell you how much I love that stuff. So books like Tenders the Flesh is, that's the, of course, English title. There's so many things about it. First of all, how does civilization change when then people want to eat meat so much that they have to harvest other humans to eat? Now imagine, and you believe it. You believe that because we saw 20th century, and not just even before that, slavery, what we did to the indigenous people that were already here when we conquered the push westward, and what we can do to other human beings. And once you start doing those things, that's the true horror of life. That's why movies like Eli Roth's Hostel, although I do prefer Hostel 2, because you get to learn about the psyche of somebody who would want to do something like that. But yeah, with enough money, or I love the idea that, Frank Cotton in Hellblazer or Hellraiser, I've talked about this before. He's so nothing in the pleasures of the flesh, nothing satisfies him. So he wants to break the veil between humanity and the Cenobites, and he wants to have the pleasures of the flesh, and they can only satisfy him if they're instigated or brought to him by hell itself. I love that stuff. I love it because of what it says about humanity, and it helps me cope with my fear, because it's like, well, you know what? Tomorrow is not going to be as bad as what happened to the characters in Tenders the Flesh. So I take solace in the fact that I have just read something that's absolutely horrific, but I know I don't have to really deal with it. So, loving the horror genre, and sort of giving you some background where I'm at with horror, I have to say that I find a lot of what's going on with modern horror, the box office this year, horror in 2025, Sinners and Weapons alone brought in Warner Brothers over $500 million. Those two movies, if you add to it The Conjuring Last Rites, which is in itself closing in on $500 million. And then you go to other movies. This is all Warner Brothers. Final Destination, Bloodlines. I mean, Warner Brothers and New Line, over $1 billion in horror. And then, of course, I think my favorite of all of those movies was Companion, which came out, Zach Kreger's his extended mafia of filmmakers, Companion. Zach Kreger was going to direct Companion, but he didn't, but his friend did. That was my favorite of all those movies. Because, again, it was a hybrid film. It was a horror / science fiction movie, and it delved into its subject matter quite well. Well, horror's back, baby. We got Black Phone coming out, Black Phone 2. Bring Her Back, which was rather a depressing film. Not a lot of fun to be had there, but a great movie from Los Bros. I can't pronounce their last name correctly, so I won't, but the people that brought You Talk to Me. Again, a worthy film. Half of A24's output is elevated horror. And there's always something good to find. There's always some crazy shit out there that is worth a look. Severin released one of my favorite. Who would have thought Turkey would come out with a banger of a horror film? I mean, it's not as look. I give it a little more than it probably deserves because it came from Turkey. But Baskin came out in 4K from Severin this year. You go, Severin. So there's a lot of really interesting horror. I do think, though, if you look at Sinners, and you look at Weapons, and you look at Final Destination Bloodline, and you look at The Conjuring Last Rites, I think all of those movies are pretty safe. They're pretty safe. They are not delving into transgressive human horror like I like a lot. They're safe. They are horror for everybody. And the real question that I have for you tonight, for all of you, pondering this, is that enough? Is that enough? And I feel I have not seen or experienced a lot of transgressive horror. Now remember, I don't just mean movies that are beyond the pale, like a Serbian film. Yes, that's transgressive, but at the end, I understand the director. It's making a comment on the Balkans War. You can say what you want, bruh. But that film, it was like, let's sit around and think about the most disgusting. And I appreciate that, and I own it, uncut. I do. But the thing is, I want my transgressive horror with a huge dollop of philosophy. You know, I remember when we were making Hills Run Red in Bulgaria, you know, Dave was getting to make Dave Parker, the director, of course, my friend Dave. He was getting to make this great slasher character that he'd created, and I was much more interested in Wilson Wyler Kincannon, the filmmaker. And he said to me once, he kind of was exasperated with me, and he said, "Enough of your philosophy. What's with the philosophy?" You know, and even one of the characters in the movie says, "Get to the kill." I always thought that was kind of funny. But for me, you know, I go back to Videodrome, that woman that has the hots for Max Wren, she's talking about why he shouldn't look for Videodrome. And I always say this, again, my philosophy of all this stuff was shaped by movies that came out in 1983. But when she says to Max, don't go looking for Videodrome. Videodrome is dangerous because, say it with me now, it has a philosophy. And the Marquis de Sade had a philosophy. The filmmaker who was making the movie within a movie in a Serbian film, he had a philosophy. Philosophy is where horror gets really good. You know, when you think about, we're now getting, what are we getting? American Crime Story, whatever. We're going to get the Ed Gein story again in a different format, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, to me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre has lost none of its power because, to me, Texas Chainsaw is, again, one of the great examples of, I would say, perfect, extreme, transgressive horror, in the sense that you now have human beings that are completely, well, they've reached the point where they're almost animalistic, in the sense that they see all other human beings as dinner, as meat, and there is no empathy, and there is nothing will save you if you run afoul of these people. Leatherface and his family, if you run afoul of them, unless you can escape somehow, it truly is, I mean, hell to me has always been metaphoric, but to run across Leatherface and his family is the ultimate example of going to hell, being doomed for eternity. You're going to die. There's no way out. There's no reasoning. There's no... and they're human beings, and they're going to kill you and eat you without remorse. They're not going to think about you again. They're going to turn your bones into lamps and chairs and mirrors, whatever the hell they do with your bones, and they're going to eat the rest of you. And there is no escape. And to me, that is when horror delves into that's where I want to live. Not literally, but imaginatively, figuratively, when I'm watching a horror film. See, to me, like, I was never really interested in slasher movies. Like, I really liked Halloween because I liked the technique of it. And Halloween had a lot to say about suburbia. And there's this great conversation that the teacher's having about fate. And I always remember when I first got Halloween and watched it many, many, many times, I always loved that because, like, John Carpenter figured out a way to get a little philosophical in Halloween. And the fact that it's basically a bloodless movie. You know, but you've got some sex in it. The idea that teenagers are being punished for sex, I always thought that was an oversimplification. And then when we got a movie like It Follows, a movie I didn't love when I first saw it, I like it more now, especially after getting the second sight disc. But when you watch It Follows, I thought I was so in on that movie. And I think It Follows has the second greatest, it's not really a jump scare, but it's there's a moment one of the followers just comes through a door. And there's something about it that is it's one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. It's so well done. But the problem with It Follows is, you know, it talked about, like, you have to have sex to get this curse or whatever it is, but they don't really get into the sex part of it. You know, it's not sexy. You understand what's going on, but it's like it shies away from the sex. And the horror is really, really interesting until you realize halfway through the movie you don't know what it is. It's what I used to call an impossible premise. Like shows like Lost have an impossible premise. My beloved, horrible, gobbledygook-filled Manifest. Impossible premise. You've got a great pilot. You don't know where it's going. You're never going to figure out where it's going. And you're only left to, at the end, it's got to be purgatory. And, of course, the people in Manifest have to land exactly when they were supposed to. And everything they went through, it's like, oh, my God, none of it really happened, or blah, 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 or whatever. It Follows had an impossible premise for a movie. Normally you get it's a series, but it's a movie that they can never explain it. They don't know what it is. It was really creepy, and I think They Follow is the next one, the sequel that's coming out. Maybe they'll know, maybe they'll figure it out. But that was the thing. I was watching It Follows. I saw it in the theater. I saw it in the ArcLight, and I'm watching it on a Saturday with my friend Dave Hargrove. And we're watching this movie, and we both realized kind of at the same time, it really jumps the shark at this moment in this boathouse. When it's like, oh, they really don't know what's going on, and they have no idea what's going on. And that bummed me out. Because the whole thing is when you want to get to that revelation and find out what was happening. Are we going to get to that revelation? Is it going to work? And when you realize that the filmmakers don't know what it is, well, then you're like, oh, well, we have an idea. Yeah, but then you start breaking your rules, and all of a sudden things start to change, and there's a physicality in the real world. Bum me out. Still like It Follows, but, what can you expect? Not everything can be The Exorcist. But anyway, I do feel that we got a lot of great, like, I love Sinners. I thought Sinners was great. I see it less as a horror movie and more about, again, it's a movie that has horror elements, but it's really about that time period. And a lot of the horrors that it alludes to are metaphoric, allegorical. I just love that movie. I love hanging out with that. I just love putting that movie on. I just love it. I don't necessarily think it's a great horror movie per se, but I do love it. And it's a terrific film. I think it'll be an Oscar contention. But movies like Final Destination, Bloodline, well done. And you're there to see the kills. And it was kind of a hoot. Meaningless, ultimately. I really loved The Conjuring Last Rites when I was watching it. I never have to see it again. Movies about ghosts, unless you're talking J-horror, when there's something more going on, they're not just ghosts. I mean, they're your ancestors. They've been around. They're watching you. There's something about Asian horror when it comes to the supernatural that I like more than just... I mean, don't get me wrong. Give me George C. Scott and the Changeling. I love it. Very effective. But at the end of the day, it's like these kinds of ghost stories. These ghosts are also... There's a mystery that the protagonists have to solve. And when they solve it, they put the restless spirit to rest. It's almost like uplifting in a way. Like you watch these haunting movies like, oh, now we know what happened, and now they can go away in peace. Which is uplifting, but I like my horror bleak. I like it transgressive, and I like to be unsettled and disturbed by it weeks after I've seen it. Tender as the Flesh, it's only a book, but it will do that. At least I found it would do that. And it's a short book. You'll enjoy it. If you enjoy those kinds of things. It's very off-putting, and when you get to the end, it's like, yeesh. Yeesh. It's very transgressive. But it's got a great premise. So anyway, I found this article, as you know I would. And it's kind of an interesting article, but it's where it came from that I thought was really interesting. And let me grab it. Where did it go? I know it's here because you can see it. Oh, here it is. So I got this article, and this comes to us from Made in China. Made in China. So Business Insights, and this is why I read this. This is why I stopped and read this article, because what do the Chinese say about horror? And there's always been some great Asian. I mean, obviously some of the great horror films of recent times. I mean, I really like movies like The Sadness. Really like The Wailing. Of course, Train to Busan. You know, there's been some great stuff coming out of Asia. Obviously, Roy Lee, when he got in on the J-horror, The Ring and The Grudge, good stuff. My favorite, Kyushu Kurosawa's Pulse, following up his, why am I drawing a blank on it? You know, the movie he made before, Cure. Great stuff. But so, why are horror movies taking over 2025? The shocking global trends no one saw coming. Oh, yeah, they did. Everybody acts like when horror is successful, like, oh my God, horror's back. Everyone with short memories. Horror never left, never went anywhere. So anyway, the horror movie genre, this is not some deep article. I just thought I would share it because it was an interesting perspective coming out of the Chinese neck of the world. The horror movie genre has always had a loyal fan base, but 2025 has witnessed a phenomenon no one could have predicted. Horror films are not just breaking records. They're redefining what it means to go viral, dominate the box office, and capture the global imagination. Across continents, audiences are flocking to theaters and streaming platforms, sharing memes and reactions on social media, and fueling a merchandising boom that stretches from Tokyo to Toronto. What is driving this explosive growth, and what does it mean for global buyers, procurement professionals, and content creators? Let's explore the trends, innovation, and future prospects that have made horror the genre of the year. Now, I found this article this afternoon after I was listening to I was actually watching a, I don't know if it all blurs together. If it was maybe it was an NPR story, and they were talking about, but I think it might have been a reel that I saw on Instagram. I think it was a reel I saw on Instagram where somebody in the music business I'd never seen before, I just started following him today, was talking about how physical media in Asia has become big business again. Tower Records never went out of style. And if you've watched All This Too Must Pass, or All Things Must Pass, the Tower Records documentary, you know that Tower Records still exists. But they were talking about the music industry in Asia and how albums and CDs are selling because they're packaged with photo cards and all the stuff that we get with our physical media, our movies here in the States. But music is really big in Asia because people want those things. They want to own things. And that streaming, while streaming is big here, in Asia, people still like to have stuff. And then I found this article, which I thought was interesting, which is why I wanted to share it. What makes 2025 a record year for horror films? 2025 has become a landmark year for horror movies, with the genre surpassing even the most anticipated superhero blockbusters and mainstream franchises in terms of both box office revenue and cultural impact. This year's horror releases, such as Sinners, Final Destination Bloodlines, and The Conjuring Last Rites, have not only attracted traditional fans, but have also brought in new audiences eager for immersive, adrenaline-pumping experiences. IMAX and other premium viewing formats are a major factor, offering a level of sensory engagement that intensifies every jump scare and psychological twist, making horror films must-see events rather than just casual entertainment. The industry's ability to blend legacy franchises with fresh directorial voices has resulted in a dynamic mix of nostalgia and innovation, keeping both longtime enthusiasts and first-time viewers on edge. Global box office data reveals that horror is outperforming genres that once seemed untouchable, with several releases topping charts not just in North America, but also across Asia, Europe, and Latin America. This surge is further propelled by the genre's adaptability. Horror films are being tailored to local tastes while still resonating with universal fears and anxieties, making them uniquely positioned to succeed in diverse markets. As a result, horror has become a bellwether for industry trends, setting new standards for what's possible in global cinema. How social media turned horror into a viral phenomenon. The rise of social media has transformed the way audiences interact with horror movies, turning the genre into a viral sensation that extends far beyond the theater. Platforms like TikTok have given birth to communities such as Horror Talk, where users share short-form edits, reaction videos, and meme compilations that quickly gain millions of views. Hashtags like IMAX horror, psychological thriller, and jump scare trend regularly, amplifying the reach of new releases and sparking global conversations. YouTube creators dissect the scariest moments while fans on Instagram and Twitter remix iconic scenes into viral content that keeps the buzz alive long after opening weekend. What's particularly striking is the way these platforms have shifted the core demographic for horror. While the genre once skewed younger, it now appeals to a broader age range, especially strong among 25 to 34-year-olds who drive both online engagement and ticket sales. The global nature, and I find that interesting because, horror movies when I was younger appealed to a younger demographic, namely high school students, because we would go and hopefully get our ladies turned on and get a little something, you know what I'm saying? Now it skews older because people fuck less, because fucking has become commodified. And who wants to bother? There's too much pressure now. Before, everybody wanted to get some no matter who you were, and it was much easier. Now it's an ordeal. I'm so glad I'm not in my high school years anymore, or in my 20s for that matter. The global nature of social media means that a scare from a Japanese or Spanish horror film can become an overnight sensation in the United States or the UK, breaking down cultural barriers and creating a truly international fan base. This word-of-mouth momentum is invaluable for buyers and procurement professionals as it provides real-time insights into what resonates with audiences and where the next big opportunity may lie. That's like we get things like Where Evil Lurks. Again, coming out of Latin America, some great horror. There's some wacky stuff. I remember I'd heard about We Are the Flesh. I was unprepared for where this Mexican horror film took me. I was like, holy shit. Thank you, Arrow. But international horror is at its zenith. The stuff that they've been doing in Korea, Indonesian horror, there's the sadness. There's been some great stuff. And then, of course, Finding Basking coming out of Turkey. Even like the horror film Holy Spider, which is based on a real-life event, but pretty horrific, coming out of Iran. Then, of course, I watched a horror film from Pakistan. That was last year. I interviewed the director for Designing Hollywood. So horror is coming through. So from everywhere, which is really exciting. Imagine the one thing that brings the world together, horror. When we're not perpetrating against one another, we're watching it together in theaters. That's the way it should be. Why are psychological and social horror films dominating? One of the most significant shifts in 2025's horror landscape is the dominance of psychological and social horror films, which tap into deeper anxieties and reflect pressing societal issues. Rather than relying solely on supernatural elements or graphic violence, these movies explore themes of isolation, mental health, identity, and often overlooked fears lurking beneath everyday life. Titles like Together, The Woman in the Yard, and Smile 2 have resonated with audiences by weaving horror into narratives about race, gender, and social alienation, prompting viewers to confront uncomfortable truths in a safe fictional context. That's what great allegorical fantasy does best. This approach not only elevates the genre artistically, but also makes it more relevant to a world grappling with rapid change and uncertainty. Discussions around these films frequently spill over into social media and academic circles, with viewers analyzing how horror can serve as both a mirror and a warning for society. For global buyers and content strategists, this trend underscores the importance of stories that connect emotionally and intellectually, offering more than just momentary thrills, but also lasting cultural impact. The technology behind the scare is innovation in 2025 horror films. Technological innovation has become a cornerstone of the horror genre in 2025, driving both creative storytelling and audience engagement to new heights. Virtual reality and augmented reality experiences allow viewers to step directly into the action, blurring the line between spectator and participant. AI-driven narratives adapt to user choices, making each viewing unique and unpredictable. Films like 28 Years Later have experimented with iPhone cinematography, creating a sense of immediacy and authenticity that traditional cameras sometimes lack, while interactive features in movies such as Dead Male invite audiences to influence the plot in real time. Streaming platforms have played a pivotal role in amplifying these innovations, giving filmmakers the freedom to experiment with hybrid genres and unconventional formats. The result is a genre that feels fresh and unpredictable, constantly evolving to meet expectations of a tech-savvy, globally connected audience. For industry professionals, these advancements open up new avenues for collaboration, distribution, and audience engagement, positioning horror as a leader in the entertainment technology. How fans and merchandising supercharge the horror boom. The horror boom of 2025 is not just a product of great filmmaking, it's also the result of passionate fan communities and a thriving merchandising ecosystem. Fans are more than just viewers. They're active participants who create reviews, reaction videos, fan art, and even their own horror-themed products and tattoos. The horror tattoo business is endless. This grassroots promotion has proven invaluable, generating buzz and sustaining interest long after a film's initial release. The surge in horror merchandise, from t-shirts and action figures to home decor and collectibles, reflects the genre's broad appeal and its ability to inspire loyalty among consumers. Among consumers. Global and local influences blend seamlessly, with Asian and European horror aesthetics finding fans in markets that were once dominated by Hollywood. This cross-pollination has led to a richer, more diverse range of products, making horror not just a cinematic experience, but a lifestyle. Amen. For buyers, merchandisers, and procurement specialists, the message is clear. The opportunities in horror go far beyond the screen, encompassing everything from retail partnerships to fan-driven marketing campaigns. So, what's next for horror? Future prospects and industry debates. As horror continues its meteoric rise, industry insiders are already debating how to sustain this momentum and avoid potential pitfalls. One key concern is genre fatigue. Can the market support so many horror releases without diminishing returns? The answer may lie in its diversification, with filmmakers exploring off-peak release schedules, cross-genre experimentation, and new business models such as interactive experiences, horror podcasts, and immersive attractions. Global market expansion is another major focus, particularly in Asia and Europe, where local horror traditions are gaining international recognition. Streaming platforms are facilitating this growth by making it easier for audiences to discover and engage with content from around the world. For buyers and procurement professionals, staying ahead of these trends is essential, as is the next big hit could come from an unexpected source. The future of horror is not just about scares, it's about innovation, inclusivity, and the ability to adapt to a rapidly changing media landscape. Why horror's 2025 explosion matters for global audiences and buyers. The transformation of horror in 2025 is more than a fleeting trend. It's a testament to the genre's resilience, adaptability, and cultural significance. Horror has become a proving ground for new technologies, storytelling techniques, and business models, offering valuable lessons for anyone involved in the global entertainment industry. For buyers, producers, and merchandisers, the current boom represents a unique opportunity to tap into a passionate, engaged audience that spans borders and demographics. As the genre continues to evolve, its influence will likely extend far beyond the screen, shaping everything from fashion and art to technology and social discourse. In a world hungry for connection, catharsis, and creative innovation, horror stands out as a genre that not only entertains, but also inspires and unites. So I put a link to this article. I won't go into the frequently asked questions section because you all know the answers to that. But one of the things that I love about horror too, for me right now in 2025, and Roy Lee knew this. You're going to see the full interview I did with Roy Lee later this week. Roy Lee knew this when he was reading forums and heard about J-horror and procured the rights. One of the great things about watching horror films, whether it's Where Evil Lurks, whether it's We Are the Flesh, whether it's something from India, something from, well, all the European horror films, of which there are many, Giallo films from Italy, you learn something about the culture that these films come from, because they're different cultures than America. And I think one of the great things about horror movies is, especially from other countries, is you get a real sense of how those countries are different from the United States. And that's one of the things I've always loved about international horror. And that's why watching a movie like, well, Where Evil Lurks, or if you haven't seen it, The Coffee Table. I gotta file this actually. By the way, if you don't know anything about The Coffee Table, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but going cold for do it for the Bobster and the Deets. But that's what I love about international horror is depending on where it comes from, its specificity makes it really interesting. Different religious views, different review. Like in Asian culture, they know your ancestors are looking at you, and you can't get rid of a curse, no matter how hard you try. It doesn't go away. Or they're the differences in, look at movies like The Wailing and Where Evil Lurks, and look at how they deal with possession. Great stuff. And I love it. I love it. And that's what I love about horror. I love it so much. So anyway, I think about things like American horror movies don't really do it for me, to be honest. It takes something really special. Like, for instance, after seeing Barbarian, I'm a Zach Cregger fan. I thought Barbarian was really well done. But the thing is, once you've seen Barbarian, I don't know about the replayability of it. I kind of feel the same way for Weapons. Weapons was a hoot. And you can enjoy watching it, but at the end, there's all these questions, and you ask yourself about Aunt Gladys. Cregger wasn't particularly interested in telling us the whys and wherefores of everything, and that's fine. But for a movie that does delve into what's it like for a parent to lose their children, it wasn't particularly interested with any of that either. You could definitely make a movie like that, but what Weapons was for people was fun. It was fun because that wacky ending that kind of came out of nowhere, and you're following this mystery, and with a mystery story, with the paradigm of a mystery, you're expecting it to be solved in certain ways because we have that expectation, and of course that expectation was in fact subverted because of the wacky shit that went down in Weapons. Nobody was expecting Aunt Gladys. And when she showed up, we're all like, what? But that's Zach Cregger's genius. He's got a couple other things coming that I can't wait to see. He's got Resident Evil coming, and he's got something I like to call the space movie. But and all I can say is I can't wait to see that. But the Zach Cregger has his finger on the pulse. I want to see him branch out and do some more interesting stuff. I think David Pryor, David Pryor, who made DVD special features, a movie that I particularly liked, was The Empty Man, that nobody saw. But The Empty Man, where's that physical media? Let's get that on 4K, somebody. Come on, license that shit out. Why is Fox sitting on these movies? Come on, Steve Asbell, get it out there for us. They're doing better, though. They're doing better. But that's what's really interesting about horror as well. Every country has a different flavor. And it's a way to travel around the world. Traveling around the world through horror. What a good way to go. What's not to love about that? I don't know. Am I the only one who feels this way? Maybe somebody else feels this way too. Let's see. Let's see what people are saying. I don't know. Royston S. Bailey says, why is the gore horror subgenre so popular now? Oh, you're talking about movies like Terrifier. Look, I think now the idea of our bodies getting smashed apart is something that because of social media, and we're looking at that for the modern generation to have something happen to their looks or happen to their physical presence. That's really horrifying. And again, in a way, movies like Terrifier also dip their toes into the loss of civility, because those characters have no remorse and they don't care, and they'll do the most horrible things to human beings. So you get a little bit, to me, they're boring because they don't have a lot more going on. But if you want to look at them that way, you get kind of the best of both worlds. If you're a gorehound, the kills are great. They're lots of fun, and they can be as creative. I mean, I say this, I hope I'm not going to get locked up, but everybody knows what I mean when I say the kills are fun in horror movies. Nobody wants to die. It's dealing with the anxiety of that, but also in Terrifier, it just, the kills happen in like the worst ways. So you get the inhumanness of it, you get the great gore and the physical effects and all that. So I think people are having a fun time with those movies. I don't know what that says, that we're all a bunch of sick fucks, but it is, to me, it's not interesting because there's no philosophy. You know, there just isn't. Jamie Sundays says, sidebar, what did you think of One Battle After Another? I didn't see it. As I said last night, I was going to go last night, see it in True IMAX at the Irvine Spectrum. I didn't go because I had a family thing I had to deal with, so I missed going with Alvaro and Bill Hunt. So, sidebar, what did you think of One Battle After Another? Been waiting to hear your thoughts. I think it's the best film in the last 10 years. Well, that's some big words. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I really want to go see it in IMAX, but I will see it this week, and then I can talk about it. Royston S. Bailey says, the Alien novelization terrified me as an 11-year-old. Yeah. Alan Dean Foster wrote that, right? You know, I know people that collect movie novelizations. Max Allan Collins has written movie novelizations. So, yeah. Paul Allen Bernardo says, hi, Rob, what's your current favorite horror movie that you were genuinely surprised by? For me, it's The Wind from 2018. Quite creepy, by director Emma Tammy. That's a good question. Of all the horror movies that I've seen that surprised me, you know, I keep going back to The Wailing just because it did not go where I was expecting it to go. And I really love the way it ended. And, you know, Where Evil Lurks is one that I really, really liked. There's a lot I haven't got to yet. But those two, I mean, and I did kind of like the sadness. I like that. But The Wind, I haven't seen that. I'll have to see that. Royston S. Bailey says, apropos of TNG, Q-Who Frame of Mind had good horror. Yeah, Q-Who was the first Borg episode, and Frame of Mind, you know, did Riker go insane? All good stuff, absolutely. Brian McCann's been a member for 8 months, and Brian McCann says Phantoms is highly underrated. Great cast. Well, you know, we all know that Affleck was the bomb in Phantom, Joe. I love that book. That was Dean Koontz. And Phantoms was a great book. I really like the book. And you're right. I think the movie Phantoms, it's respectable. I liked it. I thought it was good. Royce S. Bailey says Netflix should adapt Kozeman's All Tomorrows. I don't know that. Brian McCann says Rutger Hauer's Split Second is a great horror action. Yeah, it's all right. I don't love it, but it's not bad. Kellraiser says, the popularity of horror is why Marvel Studios needs to develop the Marvel Supernatural Universe and introduce the Marvel monsters into the MCU. I maintain, Kellraiser, that one of the big problems with the Blade movie is they never really thought about it. We had our Werewolf by Night. How do you incorporate, like, it's really interesting to me that when they came up with the MCU, they stayed away from Supernatural and they stayed away from mutants. They had to stay away from mutants because of Fox. Fox had the mutants, and they didn't know Disney was going to buy Fox. So I get that. But they could have, I mean, there was a Man-Thing movie before Werewolf by Night that Kevin Feige produced, that Brett Leonard, who directed Lawnmower Man and a pretty great transgressive horror film called Feed, that should be on everyone's list of fun. But you're right. I mean, I think that they should have. I would love to have had the Marvel Supernatural universe, but it's really hard with the MCU. How do you weave in the supernatural of it all and make it credible? Does that stretch too far? I thought that Moon Knight was terrible. They went for the Egyptian gods going around. That was not good. That was latter Moon Knight. They should have made more. They could have leaned into the schizophrenia, but by going full on Khonshu, I thought it was wrong, and it just didn't work. And you can see why it didn't work. Yeah. Draven Cold says, RMB, I wish you guys didn't shoot Superman Returns on the Panavision Genesis camera. It's a brown movie stuck in 1080i with an urgent need of a fresh color transfer. Well, they were pushing the boundaries on that set. We got cameras 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 right off the production line. They were pushing the boundaries. And look, I'd love to see that movie get re-released. I'm definitely pushing for Arrow to take it away from Warner Brothers to put it out. I'd love to see that done. I hope one day it is. I don't know if that day will ever come, but I would love to see that done. Obviously, having worked on it, I'd love to see. I've talked to Brian about putting out the Friends and Family version of that movie, which is a half an hour longer, and I think it works. I think it's a better movie. Mr. Z sent 10 Burnettwork memberships out into the world. That was very nice of you to do that, so thank you very much. Dr. Janice Lester sends in a tip and says, happy birthday, RMB. Well, Janice, there's some horror. I'd do a little body swapping with you, though. That could be some fun. We could have some fun with that. I keep waiting for, maybe somebody's already done this. Where is the body swapping movie where like a husband and wife change bodies and they love fucking each other in each other's bodies and going that direction and see where that goes? You could come up with something really transgressive and interesting doing that. Somebody has to have done that already, right? Haven't they? I don't know. Maybe they haven't. I have an interesting letter that is very topical that I got yesterday. No, I got it this morning. Very topical about today. It's political and it's about Star Trek. And I liked it. And so I'm going to read it. And a lot of people are probably going to get mad. But this comes to us from Joe Panora. And I'm going to read this letter because it's great. Joe Panora writes, Star Trek and Pete Hegseth, the return to the ethos of duty. Here we go. Strap yourselves in. Greetings, RMB and the PGS. This letter may draw some pushback from parts of the PGS, but I write it inspired by our own Robert Meyer Burnett. You don't have to agree with what he may say, but we must defend the right to say it whether we agree or not. Amen. The moment we stop engaging with one another is the moment dehumanization begins. Otherism takes root, and history shows us that terrible outcomes follow. This is why I've been a fan of R&B since Heroes. That's Collider Heroes. That was AMC Heroes, which I did with John Stepp and John Campea starting in 2015. I may not share his views on everything, but I value his nuanced takes and, of course, his passionate Star Trek rants. With that said, here's my perspective. The Secretary of War's recent speech, the one today, framed a stark but clarifying vision. America's armed forces exist for one mission: warfighting. By renaming the Department of Defense back to the Department of War, this speech stripped away decades of euphemism and drift. Its core message was simple: peace is secured only through strength, standards, and unflinching readiness. To restore that culture, the Secretary called for higher fitness requirements, merit-based promotions, the end of political distractions, and a renewed seriousness about combat. The goal is not war for its own sake, but peace grounded in preparedness, discipline, and the warrior ethos. I'd like to have heard a little bit more von Clausewitz with this speech. Now, let me just stop you. I'm going to opine as we go along. Part of what Pete Hegseth was saying was completely divorced from the real world. First of all, if you look at our potential men and women, new recruits, we're down to about only 25% of military age recruits, meaning 18 to 25, can even pass the physical fitness tests. So I've always said that a healthy and educated population are the front lines of our defense. And what Pete Hegseth was saying did not mention at all winning the hearts and minds of our opponents. We live in a world that is way different than just soldiers on a battlefield. And I understand that he was talking about keeping standards. He spent a long time talking about beauty standards, to be honest. And having worked with special operators for the last 8 years on crisis medicine, you're not going to get anybody who's going to go work in Afghanistan or anywhere in the Middle East that's going to be shaving every day. And those kinds of things were absurd. And I'm watching them and I'm thinking, you've not been on the battlefield in a long time, Pete. I get what you're saying, and maybe in a way what you were saying was okay, but the reality of life, and this is what I feel that is what he was saying was so far removed from the actual realities of the world that we live in. Hey, pie in the sky, great. But we have to, our military has to be just as ready to win the hearts and minds of people as it does to do war fighting. And I think it's absurd to think that all we're going to do is war fighting. That is, I think, a wrong assessment. This drive to right the ship bears an uncanny resemblance to the story of Star Trek. In its golden years, the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise, and the classic films, Starfleet was depicted as a professional military naval-inspired service with a scientific charter. Exploration and diplomacy were part of its mission, but readiness and discipline were assumed. Absolutely, 100%. Captain Kirk's duel with the Romulan commander in Balance of Terror played like a Cold War submarine thriller, emphasizing tactics, training, and chain of command. The Dominion War arc of Deep Space Nine showcased logistics, alliances, and morale in a brutal war of attrition. Even Voyager's Year of Hell highlighted how discipline and preparedness sustained a crew through relentless combat pressure. In all of these series, Starfleet's commitment to standards was the bedrock of its legitimacy. 100%. I'd also like to point out that our current administration, whether you're a fan of Trump or not a fan of Trump, he has demonized half the American people. And not only that, he's talking about sending this war-fighting group into American cities. The military was never meant to police American cities. And while, yes, the military is supposed to go after wars, enemies, foreign and domestic, you're not supposed to go in and terrorize American citizens in cities. And President Trump came out today and said that maybe we should use democratic cities as training bases for the military. So you've got Pete Hegseth saying this, and at the same time, or just before, you have President Trump talking about sending troops into American cities. This is not a good look. Right before a government shutdown? I would say that before you can think about war fighting, you should put the country itself on a much stronger footing and make sure that we're unified against the Constitution. Our military is not supposed to pledge allegiance to the president, after all. Our military should pledge allegiance to the U.S. Constitution. I'd like to hear more about that. So what we heard today was dismaying, to say the least. I get where Hegseth is coming from, but you can't have a military when your government is divided. The president's the commander-in-chief, but when he's talking about sending our military into American cities, what do you think that does to the very morale of those troops? I'll tell you, it doesn't do anything good for them. So, this has been your most passionate critique of modern Star Trek, Rob. From Discovery to Strange New Worlds, we no longer believe the crews on the bridges are an elite force, the best in their fields, who sacrifice to earn their place amongst the stars, inspiring us to strive for greatness in our own journeys. Instead, what have we been given? Essentially, The Office in space. Poorly written characters placed on the shoulders of exceptional actors, indistinguishable from the employees of Dunder Mifflin. 100%. By the way, this is a great letter. Let me just say. beautifully stated points. And I totally agree. And the reason is because the people that are writing this stuff, they don't believe or understand what it means to, and you put this beautifully. Let me read this again. You said, Starfleet was depicted as a professional military naval-inspired service with a scientific charter. Exploration and diplomacy were a part of its mission, but readiness and discipline were assumed. Chef's kiss, my man. Chef's kiss. That's exactly right. 100%. Fans have been crying out for better Star Trek. By the way, the people that are writing Star Trek don't believe that those kinds of exceptional people can exist because they themselves are all a mess. I got to go to therapy, and I got to deal with my identity politics, all this stuff. They don't believe in the greatness of America as a country, or at least what America can aspire to be, and they don't know what it is like to live or work in that kind of service and what it means to have a team or a group or a military that you can rely on. They don't even understand that, and if they did understand it, they don't believe it. And if you don't believe it, you can't write it effectively. I mean, maybe some good authors could, but these idiots can't because they've never lived that life. They don't believe in any of those Star Trek ethos, and it shows through in all of their writing. Or, remember, what is Star Trek but an extension of American exceptionalism and American constitutionalism? That's what it was. It was what the Camelot White House of John F. Kennedy aspired to be. Take away all the partisan bickering, because ultimately, I believe all Americans do not want. I mean, now it's gotten to the point where we've been so infantilized that all we have left is partisan bickering. Nobody are adults anymore. Where are statesmen? Hey, hello to the government shutdown. Well done, Congress. Do your fucking jobs. I don't care if you hate one another. It used to be that you could bitch and moan and argue. But if America is dysfunctional, you can't expect our military to fix it. So, fans have been crying out for better Star Trek. While Season 3 of Picard had its flaws, it was the Shawshank Redemption of New Trek. A moment of redemption, a reminder of what this franchise can be. That call to return to the core was perfectly embodied in the release of 765874 Unification, an emotional farewell to Kirk and Spock, which, by the way, was steeped in canon, beta canon and alpha canon. With no dialogue, only pure emotion radiating from the performances, it renewed our resolve to demand better, 100%. The Department of War speech that Pete Hegseth gave today, I'd argue, shares that outlook. Its insistence on fitness, proficiency, and merit echoes the Wrath of Khan, where a failure of training nearly doomed the Enterprise, and Admiral Kirk relearned the value of preparedness. He was caught with his britches down. Its call to end political distractions mirrors Enterprise's third season. When Captain Archer realized survival demanded focus, sacrifice, and the addition of specialized military detachments. In the classic vision, as in the Secretary's speech, peace and exploration were only possible because the warriors were sharp, trained, and led with clarity. But see, that's assuming that our military isn't already that. And having worked with members of the military, my best friend Mike Schertz being one of them, that's who I've been doing crisis medicine with, they are very prepared. My friend Mike is an ER doctor on the front lines of saving people's lives every single day. And he still trains military, and he's an 18 Delta. He was a Special Forces medic. And everybody that's worked with us on crisis medicine, there have been many special operators that I've got to talk to and interact with and heard how they feel and how they think. A lot of them have gone into education. They've gone into private practice where they're actually still using their military skills and things like that. These are very well-trained people. I got a little hint. I mean, I understand Pete Hegseth's in great shape, and, you know, he likes to take his shirt off a lot, and that's great. But, you know, you're talking to people that are lifers in the military, that he was speaking to a room of the best of our military. Maybe he should have been giving that speech to cadets. But he gave that speech to a bunch of people that already knew what he was saying and probably didn't disagree with him. Discovery literally launched on a mutiny, rewarding insubordination as if that were leadership. Oh, fucking horrible. Picard often presented Starfleet as paralyzed by politics, paperwork, and more hesitation. Right, because the writers can't envision a functioning, great group like Starfleet. The only thing they know how to write is how to tear it down and destroy it, because they don't believe in anything themselves. They don't believe in the country they live in. They don't believe in anything like capitalism. They don't believe anything in work. Everything's terrible. So how can they write a good Starfleet? They can't. This mirrors the bureaucratic feelings-first culture that has seeped into parts of the real-world military over the last 20 years, where DEI initiatives, identity debates, and endless mandatory sensitivity trainings crowded out war-fighting readiness. I totally agree. Both the speech and the Golden Era Trek remind us that institutions thrive when they're true to their core mission. The military's job is to prepare for and, if necessary, to win wars. Starfleet's job was to explore the stars from a position of competence, discipline, and strength. In both cases, when those basics erode, the institution drifts into weakness and confusion. Just as the Department of War is being reoriented toward its true purpose, so too Star Trek would benefit from returning to the fundamentals that made it timeless: disciplined officers, high standards, and the hard truth that peace is preserved only when warriors are ready to fight. I'm not sharing this to sway your views on the current administration. I simply hope that you and my fellow PGSers continue to question everyone in government, regardless of party. Oh, I do. All I ask is this. As someone who admired the Republican Party in history books, I experienced culture shock watching the decline during George W. Bush's second term, and later fell into deep frustration at figures like Mitt Romney, Mitch McConnell, and others who left a pit in my stomach. Do not slip back into the comfort of tribalism. Apply the same lens to both sides and hold them equally accountable. I am all for you on that. I am all with you on that. I was willing to give the Trump presidency the second term the benefit of the doubt, but in the last 9 months, the removal of the thing is, President Trump said he didn't know what Project 2025 was, which we all knew was a lie. Project 2025 is a very one-sided view of America that is being implemented right now, and not for the benefit of the United States. It's for the benefit of some small-minded individuals that want or believe in an America that never actually existed, and they're trying to create it. And you know what? There is no good going down that road. They think there is, but there isn't. It is weakening this country on every single level. It's also taking us to a place that we can't exist in a global environment like this. We will get our clocks cleaned by the Chinese, who are our greatest rivals. And we're not doing the job right now. We are not doing the job. The fact that our government is entirely dysfunctional, the fact that we have Donald Trump mad at the Democrats because Democrats don't like him, so let's go into Democratic cities, ridiculous. The fact that we have to look at America as having two sides to be, it shouldn't have just two sides, but that it does as a strength and not a weakness. We have to get back to the fact that having that kind of debate and questioning one another rather than hating each other is what mature people do. We have become a deeply infantilized and immature and insincere nation on every single level, and it's both sides. Both sides. Don't think I'm some Democrat that's going to scream and yell about how great the Democratic Party is. My God, talk about a bunch of weak-willed, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, weak-willed, let's just leave it at that. My God, where is any kind of strength? And the strength of the Democratic Party is only going against the current administration. What is their views? What is the Democratic Party? Let's present strength if you're going to do something. Show us what you got. Show us where you want to take us, where you want to go that the Project 2025 isn't going to take us. I mean, my God, talk about weak-willed. Ugh. It's not good. That's something I've seen you do, RMB, in your commentary on Israel and Hamas, and I applaud you for it. Without naming names, there are folks in the new media pop culture space who take pot shots whenever possible against those they do not like and they claim are politically neutral. That is intellectually dishonest. something I have not seen you subscribe to, and while I will subscribe to your channel until the sun burns out or the dilithium in the universe explodes. Oh, I take that last part back. I just threw up in my mouth. In today's 24-hour news cycle, it's important to wait until all the facts are out. I saw folks like Bill Maher instantly conclude that the meeting with 800 generals and admirals signaled the arrival of martial law, when in fact it was a critique that our armed forces have grown too complacent, too fat, and too distracted by ideological agendas. With threats like Russia, China, and radical Islam at the door, we need a fighting force that looks more like Chris Pratt and not Chris Farley. But remember what Chris Pratt used to look like. Whether you or any of the PGS agree, disagree, or loathe the critique, I wish nothing but the best for all. Live long and prosper like a motherfucker. That comes to us from Joe Panora. Great letter, really well written, and I agree. I totally agree. The problem is, I wish more people did, and I wish that our government and our political situation's not as divided. We elected Congress to do the bidding of the people. Now we have a government shutdown because of their dysfunction, because they're immature and can't get it together. That's not the way I want to live, and it's not the way any of us should live. I don't know why I'm paying tariffs for albums I'm buying from the UK that aren't getting released in America. There's no American company that's going to release them because they're made by the UK, yet I have to pay double because of tariffs, which have never worked in history, and we have them for what? So, Mr. Z says, Rob, what a delight. 2 Robservations in a row. I just want to say I sent out a gift of memberships to those who are interested. I suggest you join. Pardon me. I attended my first members-only meetup last week. I attended my first test members online meetup. It was such a fun and pleasurable experience to listen to Rob and a group of endlessly fascinating people who I got to interact with. I strongly suggest you join us. See ya. By the way, thank you very much for the support. And I really appreciate hearing you say that. I'm glad you enjoyed the member chat. It was great to meet you. Kelraiser says, Marvel has already introduced the supernatural in the MCU with Doctor Strange, Wanda, and the Darkhold. I would keep the MCU separate, or the MSU separate from the MCU. Yeah, but the problem is when you have a character like Blade, and I agree, but the supernatural, the Darkhold and Doctor Strange and all that is more of the fantasy side of the MCU. This fantasy supernatural side, not the horror supernatural side. And the thing is, when you can introduce the Darkhold and all that. You can introduce Dormammu because Dormammu is a multi-dimensional being. But when you introduce Blade, the problem with introducing Blade is that you have to explain where the vampires came from. Where have they been? And how have they been keeping themselves for these centuries? And why haven't they? And as I've always joked, but not really, is when Thanos snapped his fingers, did vampires dust or did they stick around? Because they're undead. How does that work? And these are questions that they need to figure out. And I don't know how they're going to do that, but they have to figure it out. So it's interesting. And a supernatural being brings along with it, if a supernatural being brings A and B with you, it also means that C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, all those things are true too. And how do you incorporate that into the MCU? That's the real hard part. And I think that's something they have to figure out. So, yeah. Thomas Logan says, did you watch one battle after another in 1570? I did not, because I didn't get to go see it last night because I had a family issue that cropped up, so I have to go back and see it. I did not get to see it. I have not seen it at all. So, that's kind of a bummer. Well, anyway, folks, I thought I'd be able to talk more. This cold is still kicking my ass a little bit. I thought having a little snifter of whiskey would have helped me out, but it has not. So I'm going to bring this one to a close. We go into October tomorrow. Shocktober. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm going to try and do more Robservations. I'm interviewing Donald Moat, the makeup, not makeup effects, but makeup, head makeup technician, I guess. Tron Legacy on Tron Ares on Saturday. The Roy Lee interview will drop this week, so that's really cool. And I have something kind of fun that I want to try and do. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm just going to see. I realized that on my Instagram, I was very surprised. Out of the blue, I was very surprised. I was getting contacted by Facebook about how many views I was getting. And I looked at my Instagram thing, and it was like up to 1 million views in a month, like my Instagram. So I had this idea. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to put it on my Instagram thing. I'm going to try and every month try and raise money for like a charity. And I want to do it. I'm going to see if it works. I'm going to do it by asking people to just contribute $1. And my first thing that I'm going to contribute to is the Humane Society of the San Bernardino Valley, where I had my dogs spayed and neutered, and I've gone there. They do a lot of great work. And actually on October 4th, they have their big Halloween fundraiser. I didn't know that they were doing that. But I'm just going to see if I can send out a viral video and explain what I want to do and support this thing. And it's just $1. You know, I made a special PayPal email for it. And I'm going to see how much money I can raise. And I mean, I might raise $10. I might raise $20. Whatever I raise over the course of a month, then I'm going to go to the bank and I'm going to get a cashier's check. And I'm going to go down to the Humane Society, and I'm going to give them the check and say it comes from the Burnettwork. And I think it'll be kind of fun to do that every month. And if it works, maybe I won't get anybody and nobody will be interested. But if it works, you know, I could have viewers every month. We could do a new thing, but this would be on Instagram, not necessarily here. And the money doesn't go to me to spend or anything like that. It just goes into a special account, and you can account for all the money. But I figured, who doesn't have $1? You know, it's people are lazy, might not want to do it, but who knows? Maybe you could make some decent cash, and we could do that for a cause. Because I wanted to do something where I felt like, how can I muster the support of everybody and do something fun, but at the same time, at the end, you know, we make a cashier's check and go to wherever and hand the check over to the very people that we are supporting. And I just recently went down there with Sebastian, and they do great work, and, you know, people wait in line, and it's really busy, and I'm sure they could use all the help they can get. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to launch that on my Instagram. I made a little video. I'm still cutting it together, but about the whole thing. It might be a cockamamie idea that, to be honest, it came to me in a dream. I dreamt it up 2 nights ago. I had this dream of that I did this. I'm like, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. I'm gonna go do that and see what happens. You know, maybe people will contribute $1. Maybe they won't. Who knows? It'll be fun to see. Maybe it'll crash and burn, but maybe it'll be a monthly tradition, and we can just pick an institution that we can do some good work for. I know that John always has his family that he takes care of. He does a new family every year when all the people rally behind that family, and I've gone to those things, man, and it's intense hanging out with those families and being in the situations they're in. So it is wild. So yeah, and on that note, I'm going to end the show, folks. I want to thank you all for supporting the channel via super chats and tips and memberships and everything. I don't know if I can. As a matter of fact, this weekend I probably can't have a member call because my interview, I have to drive into LA to do the Tron Ares interview Saturday morning. So, and the interview's at 1. So we can't have a member call this weekend. So we'll have to do it the weekend after, I think. But on that note, I want to thank the moderating staff, and thank you all for being here, and thanks for listening. And I want to thank people for writing great letters. Joe Panoro, that was a great letter. Maybe I'll put that letter into the community tab. So, you know what? I should start doing that. Putting interesting letters into the community tab so people can read them. I never thought about that. I'm going to go do that right now. Joe will be the first. Anyway, thank you guys. And by the way, for those of you who watch the John Campea show, John Campea, he's doing these movie meetups, not this weekend, but the weekend after. He's driving to Kansas City, Missouri. Then he's driving into Canada. you know, and he's going to Chicago. He's driving his van. And after that, a couple weeks later, he's looking about going to Florida. That's insane. I mean, wow, just incredible. But anyway, on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better night.